Hey everybody, I'm going to do this video to go over the two worksheets that we didn't get to go over in class because of the technical difficulties. So you will need to watch this. We did finish the 6 critical thinking skills handout, but because we were having the technical difficulties, we did not finish the critical thinking handout with the definitions or the critical analysis overview handout. So I'm going to start with the critical thinking handout. This is important to review and to study because this will be on the test, and this contains a lot of definitions, and that'll help you with those parts of the test. So this particular handout sort of covers what critical thinking is and why it's important to you. And I think I sort of touched on this with the other discussion that we had with the other handout, that critical thinking is something that you're going to have to do whether you're working with a group at work, working with a group at school, completing a school project, or doing tasks at your job, your future career. And sometimes the employees are the group members in any situation who can critically think and analyze properly. Sometimes they can be more successful because they're able to problem solve. And a lot of times they're able to problem solve, and their success is, it comes from that because they're able to help the group as a whole. So I'm going to see if I can increase this a little bit. Hopefully that helps. Okay, so this is a quote that I really like because it sort of breaks down all the critical thinking measures that you are supposed to do when you critically think through something. So this is a Francis Bacon quote, sort of old, but it's still effective today. So critical thinking is a desire to seek, patience to doubt, because you should always doubt and ask questions and try to clarify things, fondness to meditate, because you shouldn't be quick to anger or quick to a thought. You should let it sort of marinate with you. Slowness to assert, readiness to consider, carefulness to dispose and set in order, because good critical thinkers really put things in their proper boxes and sort of organize them properly, and hatred for every kind of imposter. So you're able to sort of read between the lines, figure things out quickly, and disseminate the information properly. So here's some basics of critical thinking. Critical thinking is a decision-making process used to solve problems, and we've sort of established that in class. Here are 2 things that you should consider when you're thinking about being a good critical thinker. Critical thinking is based on evidence and logical reasoning. So a lot of times emotions aren't really part of your thinking process. And if you are having any kind of emotional attachment to something, sometimes you have to put that to the side because you want to be logical and you want to be reasonable with your thought patterns. And sometimes emotions are just memorizing responses or memorizing what you think someone says you should think. That really doesn't allow you to properly analyze or critically think through something. Critical thinking also requires evaluating and improving your own thought processes. So in the other worksheet, we talked about self-regulation and understanding your own biases and understanding societal biases and trying to figure out how you put those aside so that you can be fair with your processing of ideas and processing of not only opinions, but conclusions to help you problem solve. Critical thinking relies on universal intellectual values like clarity, relevance, and consistency. So critical thinking skills that could help you, it does help your cognitive skills, because if you're critically thinking properly, it does help you sort of develop some patterns with your thinking. And if you sort of put aside those emotions and those kind of quick to anger kinds of decision-making processes that you may have used in the past, if you properly measure your thinking and you analyze properly, then that improves your cognitive skills. It improves the way you process information. It's a foundation of logical decision making, and it helps sometimes in stressful situations, because if you're a good critical thinker and you can sort of analyze problems, then you don't return to that stress. You don't return to those burst of emotion when something comes up that's stressful, it sort of can bring a calm to you because you just start solving the problem. You don't worry as much about your emotional attachment to the issues involved. Think about working in a group for a college assignment or in a group at a community organization that you're part of or a church. And, maybe you don't like somebody in the group and they really get on your nerves. If you just concentrate on doing the work and doing the work properly and thinking through the process to complete the task, and you sort of put aside all those emotional feelings that you would have, then you're going to be more successful. If you let the other things weigh in, then you're not always as successful with the outcome because you're worried too much about your emotions. Critical thinking can also help you with higher academic and professional achievement because, like I said, if you're a good critical thinker and you're known as the problem solver and you're the person who can really think ahead of a situation, get ahead of the problem and be proactive rather than reactive, then you're more valuable to the group you're working with, or you're more valuable to your family, you're more valuable to the work project that you've been assigned to do. So those are all things to think about when you're thinking about the ways to improve with critical thinking, and also add that sort of to your toolbox of ways to be successful. So here's why critical thinking skills are worth developing. And it is a developed skill. So it's not something that everybody's just born with and they just have all the tools involved for it. It's something that you learn over time. Sometimes you get better at critical thinking as you mature because you've had more experiences and you've kind of gone through the tough times and you've develop some skills on how to handle those. But I truly believe that it's something that you can develop at an earlier age if you just work on it. It's like any skill, the more you work on it, the better you get, the more comfortable you are with working through the process. So it doesn't really matter what age you are. It's just, that's why I think sometimes as people get older, maybe they do develop the critical thinking skills more because that skill has been developed over time with experience. But that doesn't mean that if you're willing to do the work, you can't develop it at a younger age. You just have to put in the work. It's like anything: riding a bicycle, running, exercising, learning to cook, learning to drive. Anything you do a lot and you exercise the skill, you're just better at it and you just feel more comfortable with it. So critical thinking forces intellectual self-improvement. So when you become a good critical thinker, or you're willing to analyze situations, it helps you put aside those biases that we've talked about. It helps you put aside anything that's a personal, emotional attachment to something, and you just concentrate on the information. And that's usually going to do you more good than letting those emotions and kind of personal attachments to things creep in. And it's important because it helps you focus on the evidence at hand, the facts, the actual real center of the problem so that you can solve it. If you can just leave your ego out of problem solving, sometimes that helps a little bit because it does allow you to listen to someone else's perspective on the situation. It helps you just concentrate on the facts and not just your version of the facts. And it helps you consider your own performance in the process of solving a problem or working through, thinking through something critically. All of us love to sort of have our own way, and sometimes you just have to be mature enough and effective enough to just like put that aside so that the greater good happens. And that's hard for many of us, me included, but it's something that I think about when I'm working with a group. I try to think like, in this case, is that person more valid, or does that person have more experience in this area? And should I listen to what he or she is saying in the situation? And then obviously I want to put in my 2 cents worth, but I also have to listen to others and let others take the lead sometimes, or others apply their knowledge to the situation as well. And so, it is a mature kind of level of action. At its core, critical thinking is inward focused, but I also challenge you to, while you're working on yourself, also consider others in the situation, or how it would affect others. How is your decision making affecting the greater good, or the rest of the group, or the rest of the project? So you want to maximize your ability to think rationally, and you want to improve your cognitive skills, and you want to increase overall intelligence to improve performance. So this says test performance, but it would be any performance in decision making or working within a group. Critical thinking allows you to become a better team player. So I just alluded to that. If you're really thinking through the process of making decisions and you allow yourself to consider others' opinions, others' perspectives, others' experience level and their knowledge, it helps you become a better team player because you're giving value to others. They see that you're more open-minded, and then there's more of a better and more effective exchange of communication in that case. So you want to be a good team player, and you want to be a good listener, but you also want to be a good collaborator. You just don't want to sit back and never say anything. You want to let them speak and share, and then you want to contribute as well. And I don't know if all of you have been on committees or worked with groups, maybe through church or through a civic organization or through your own family. You know, I'm sure you've worked in some sort of group. There's always that person that doesn't contribute. They don't want to be part of the process. And as we know, that's not effective. So you don't want to be that person, but you do want to give everyone involved the space to share their ideas. And then you want to consider that as you work to solve a problem or as you work to think through an issue to come to a solution. Critical thinking also leads to a more creative mindset. The more you're willing to open up to many perspectives, the more creative you can be. So a lot of people, you know, they don't want to listen to the opposing viewpoint. They don't want to listen to someone that has a differing opinion or a different background or a different perspective on something. But really, if you think about it, it's not that you have to change every part of your core being. I mean, it's not that. But by learning more from someone else, it really in the end allows you to make certain assessments about yourself. It helps you have more perspective on an issue, and it makes you more creative, and it makes you more open to new ideas. Again, not trying to change your core or who you are or where your morals stand or anything like that, but you have to be able to open up to those new ideas so that you can be more effective and you can allow your own mind to stretch as well. So according to Linda Elder and Richard Paul, they have a foundation of critical thinking, and they experienced critical thinkers. They say experienced critical thinkers will naturally make more connections across subjects if they're more open to the communication of the critical thinking. And interdisciplinary logical thinking leads to professional and academic success. So the more, you know, I think we hear this about people, will say, well, they're well read, meaning they read a lot of different things. They may read nonfiction, fiction, they may read the news, they may read biographies or historical texts or things like that, even magazine articles or even blogs or posts from differing opinions. Then a lot of times that well-read person, that person that has a vast knowledge of a lot of different things, they have a more creative mindset because they're able to bring in a lot of different sets of information so that then they can form their own ideas. It's sort of that idea of bouncing off ideas between people, and it just makes you more effective. And if you only sort of stay within your own mind, there are ceilings and walls that you're kind of closing in, and you're not allowing yourself to think further. So critical thinking also helps you stay calm and rational under stress. If you're a good critical thinker, when you do have those stressful situations, you sort of know that you can work through it. You know that you have the skills to problem solve. You know you have the skills to think beyond just that emotion of that, you know, first thing that comes to mind because you're scared or fearful about something or you're unsure of the unknown. Being a good critical thinker helps you to manage that stress. Doesn't mean that you're not going to be not stressed during the time, but it allows you to sort of have compartments to place that stress or to even identify it. So being self-aware is very important because you can identify, hey, I'm really scared of this. I know even when COVID-19 came out, I have an autoimmune thing because I have celiac disease, and to me, it's not the worst thing that could happen. It's just as long as I avoid gluten, I don't feel sick. But having an autoimmune thing to start with, it was very scary to think of COVID-19. And so I tried to educate myself. I tried to gather differing opinions. And obviously, we know this has changed every day from different experts. It continues to change. But I tried to educate myself, and I tried to sort of ease some of that stress by having a strategy in place. I tried to have an open mind to how I would handle it. And, that sort of eased my fear for it. Doesn't mean I'm still not fearful of, getting a virus that, would make me sick. But I think that I tried to handle it from an intellectual standpoint, where I tried to just stay calm and do the things that the experts were suggesting that I do. So again, it changes every day. So then I have to all of us do, we have to transition to that new information. And that's that part of staying open-minded. If you have test anxiety, I think there are things you can do to have a plan in place and kind of be rational about it and ease the stress a little bit. I'm somebody who has test anxiety. I'm sure many of you do too. But I have strategies in place, things that I do when I've had to take tests that, again, the fear doesn't go away, but it eases somewhat because I'm able to control it. And again, none of us are perfect, but these are just strategies that will improve over time if you learn these skills and develop them further. Okay, let me get up just a little bit. Here's some steps for being a better critical thinker and presenting analytical information. So first of all, you want to organize your information. And we've talked in this class a little bit about how to disseminate information and organize thoughts. I mean, you can do some pre-thinking, some pre-writing, some pre-planning, and that helps organize information. I think you have to, again, be self-aware of what ways you can organize information for your own good and the way you process information. But the key to gathering information is to having some kind of system so that you can place it. And I always say place it in boxes. And you guys know I love a chart, but having it, kind of arranged so that it helps you think through and organize the information. Sometimes if you develop some organization with information that you're bringing in, it helps you kind of organize your thoughts about the topic that you're researching or the information that you're given. Structure your reasoning. Many people provide opinions, but a lot of times when people give you opinions, they're not really backing it up with data or real information from research or facts. They're just sort of giving, it's kind of that thing where people say, it's that way because it's always been that way, or it's that way because I say it's that way. But then they don't really structure the reasoning behind their opinion. So opinions aren't bad. It's just if you have an opinion, you need to structure something so that it makes sense to others. And if you put some facts behind it, if you put some data with it, it allows someone to attach to that information. Even if they don't share your opinion, they may understand it better. So that's something to consider. Develop relationships between your point of view, others' points of view, and then how they support that point of view. And that's important. If you are opinionated about something, I think it's always a good idea to establish evidence. And that's something I always try to teach my students. I think it's something I try to teach my kids over time, is that you're fine having an opinion, but you don't want the opinion. The opinion is going to fall flat if you don't support it with evidence, facts. You can't just run around just spouting opinions if you can't back them up. You end up not being credible with that. Consider the evidence. When you communicate, you want good evidence. You want to support whatever thing you're claiming to be true. You want to identify the basis for the statement that you're making. Research is always a good tool to use, and credible research is important. You want to use authoritative evidence, something from someone who is an expert in that field or who is credible in that field. So there are a lot of experts out there. There are a lot of people. We can look at celebrities and they're well known, but are they credible? And that's important. I'm sure you have friends that you love, but are they credible? Would you go to them with a problem? Would you go to them to help you solve your life crisis? Because maybe you love them, but they're not that credible. They're not able to support some of the things you need them to support. Identify your assumptions. So arguments can and should always be analyzed. Really, arguments should be torn apart and then restructured back to see if they're viable and if they can stand the test of time. Now, I think I said this in class, but remember that when we speak about arguments in academics, we're not meaning that somebody's fighting necessarily. It just means that they're stating an opinion, they're stating a side to an issue, a point of view, and they're supporting it with something. So when we say argument in academic standings, we don't mean that someone's necessarily fighting. This can mean that you're trying to build logical structure, and you're trying to show that you're well informed and that you've researched, and that if an assumption is made, that there's some credibility to it. I'm going to move this up just a little if I can. All right. Step 5 is that you need to evaluate the communication points in arguments. So there are always two sides to arguments, and so you'll have sort of a pro, a con, a for, or an against. You need to evaluate both sides of the argument and not just the one you stand with. That makes you more critical and it helps you analyze it further. So again, we're in a political season right now, and so a lot of people fall on one side or the other or somewhere in the middle. But as you're looking at different candidates, if you're voting this year, you do have to measure credibility. You have to measure the facts. You have to measure things outside of your own head just so you're clear on how you kind of came to that opinion and what you're basing it on. Same thing with, writing an argumentative paper in English or trying to prove something in a paper for another class. You want to support kind of your hypothesis. What you think is to be true, you have to support it, and you have to kind of seek out that evidence. Finally, you want to communicate the conclusion. So when you present ideas, even orally or in written form, you want to distinguish the results. You want to show the results that are important versus just the average thought. A lot of students want to go to the easiest route and the most obvious point, when really English instructors or other college instructors were looking for the analysis points, the thing that shows that you can go beyond the obvious and that you can fully communicate that. That is one thing when I talk to university professors, and I go to conferences when I can to kind of seek out additional knowledge for myself as a community college instructor, so that I can help you bridge that gap when you do go to a university, or let's say you're going into nursing, or you're going to be an engineer or something. We want you to learn how to utilize that information. But one of the big complaints of college instructors, university instructors, is that students cannot uniquely show connections with things. They always want to just go to the most obvious point, but they're not willing to go beyond that. And that hurts you as you go further in your education. You want to learn to find unique solutions and be able to prove them, and not just go to the first thing you find. You want to dig deep. There's this term called deep dive. You want to take a deep dive to get the best and most effective information to relay that information to the audience, whoever you're writing for, speaking with, that kind of thing. And you want to be clear on what claim you're making. So you don't want to dilly-dally all around, and then the person that you're communicating with doesn't clearly even understand what you're trying to prove there. So that is that handout. And then there's one more. This is an overview. So we've talked a lot about the things on the overview handout, and I'm not going to read all this to you because you guys can read, but I'm just going to go over a few points and sort of justify why I gave you this handout. But this overview sort of takes you through some basic information, some overview information about what critical analysis is, and maybe how you should approach analysis situations. So the first part of this, This is showing a student's view of writing a critical analysis. Maybe the instructor or the tutor says, be more critical, more analysis needed. And then the student doesn't really understand what the instructor or the tutor is asking them to do. So some students will say, well, I thought I wrote it well. I thought it was good. And I've had students even this semester come to me and say that. But what I will tell them is you did not support your point. You wrote 1 or 2 sentences and then you didn't have any evidence to support it. You didn't give any kind of credible information to support a very basic statement. So with analysis, you have to be specific, you have to support it. And if you don't do that, then you haven't given the instructor enough. I would say this translates also to conversation. If you have an opinion or you're stating a solution to something, if you don't give the evidence of that solution, then it's not really that viable. So keep that in mind. You always want to support everything, and you want to support it with credible information. So this is a little segment where it's explaining how instructors may want you to do a critical analysis assignment. I do always say go with what the instructor asks you to do, not just what you think they want you to do. Usually an instructor will give you guidelines for an assignment. If they don't give clear guidelines, I would say you're perfectly invited to email them or ask them in class, to clarify what they want with the assignment. But one of the most important skills that you have to learn as a student is how to think critically through an assignment and sort of link point A to point B and then come up with the final product of C. You have to present well-constructed information to your instructor. And that's sort of what an instructor sometimes means when they say, analyze this properly or present the information properly. This is one of those skills that does come over time. And it's like a muscle. You have to sort of work it so that you feel more comfortable with utilizing it and using it properly. So here's again where I restate that when we say argument, we're not meaning a disagreement necessarily, or trying to denote an unpleasant situation. We're meaning more that you're presenting a strong case, that you're supporting it with evidence, and that you have a point of view that can be proven. Here are 5 general rules for completing critical analysis successfully. So rule number 1, you want to identify the focus of the assignment. And that's sort of what I just said, but you want to kind of look back at the assignment sheet, think about what the instructor said in class, whatever instructions you've been given, you want to review that. And if you're doing a critical analysis assignment, it's not just about writing, it's also about sort of checking the boxes for that assignment, filling the gaps, filling the need for that assignment. And oftentimes the instructor will tell you what they're looking for. They'll give you a prompt. Like when we did the comparison contrast in English 111, I told you what the outcomes needed to be. So you want to think about those things that the instructor has asked you to do. Okay. Rule number 2, identify your own point of view. It's important to know where you stand on an issue, and it's important you to feel comfortable and have clarity with that. But you also, as you know your own perspective, you also want to research the opposing viewpoint, and you want to make sure that your point of view can be proven and that it's something that's viable and not just, a full opinion that is just yours in your head and it can't be really proven properly. So in academics, it's all about the proof. If you're speaking with your friends and y'all are all talking about your opinion, you can do that any way you want to. But even with your friends, I think you come off as a more intelligent person if you can support your opinion with something that's not just straight out of your head, that you have some logic and some reasoning to why you have chosen that point of view. A lot of times we use research, whether we're speaking with our friends or giving a speech in class or writing a paper in class or something like that, responding to a test question. Obviously, when you write something or when you say something, it is coming from you. It is your point of view. You may be on one side or the other. but you have to show clarity of thought and you have to show reasoning. Because if it's illogical, if it's a graded assignment, that's not going to be good. If it's with your friends, maybe they'll forgive you, but they may say, hey, that just doesn't make sense. I don't understand what he or she is talking about. So you want to take some time to disseminate the information that supports your point of view. And then you want to be willing to make some adjustments along the way, because you may find new evidence that skews your opinion or point of view slightly. And then you want to apply that as you give the information in whatever you're doing, speaking, writing, talking to a friend, whatever that would be. Okay, rule number 3, you want to consider how you'll persuade other people of your point of view. With this, I often tell students that you need to consider your audience. You need to consider who the audience is and how they receive information. If you were speaking to just a child, you might give the information one way. If you're speaking to an older person, you may think about their technical knowledge, even like what terminology you might be using and what you would have to define for them so that they understood it better. Considering audience in relation to your point of view is very important. We have a joke in my family: know your audience. Know who you're talking to. So my dad is not really big on giving gifts, like small gifts, but he'll give a larger gift because for some reason that holds more value to him, like maybe money so that they can buy something that's a little bit bigger. So when we were under quarantine, or when we were stay-at-home orders, both of my children, adults, were living at home, and we needed desks so that everybody could do their work independently. And my dad bought my 2 kids like a desk. It was like $100 a piece, but that helped them. And he bought a desk, but then he wouldn't go buy them just a little frivolous gift. So I always say, know your audience. So don't ask my dad for anything that's frivolous, because he's not going to spend the money on it. But then another family member might be really into those small little thoughtful gifts that, are just quick little, here's a Starbucks card, or here's something that's, small. And you have to know your audience. So think about your audience of your instructor. What does your instructor like? What if they said that they don't really like to see in assignments? If you're giving a speech, what would be the criteria for that speech? Know who you're speaking to. I'm sure that, if you're in a family with parents, you know how to communicate with them, or you know what buttons to push, and you want to make sure you're doing that properly so you get the outcome that you want. And so always know your audience and think about your point of view and think about how you're proving your point of view. And is that something that is going to be received well with that audience? Whenever you're showing a point of view, whenever you're using critical thinking skills, obviously you want a good outcome with whoever you're speaking with or whoever you're writing to. So if it's an instructor, you want the good grade. And if it's an audience that you're giving a speech to, you want them to receive the information. And if you're trying to persuade someone to buy something for you, or to allow you to do something, or to change a rule, or even if you work a part-time job and you're trying to get someone to trade shifts with you, you want to bring value to that conversation, and you want to have some backup, some evidence of why that should be true, why that should be done. Critical writing is really a line of reasoning. You're setting up reasons and presenting something to convince the audience through logical formation of evidence, and you want to support that so that the conclusion is how you want it to be. You want the audience to receive it and conclude the same things you would want them to. Rule 4, find the proof. So we've already done this in this class. We've already done research. We've already learned how to look in different places for different types of research. And there might be different levels of research that you would do depending on what the assignment was, what the situation is, whenever you're trying to persuade someone or trying to analyze something. And again, this is something that I think happens with time and practice, and finding the proof. You sort of find your rhythm with how you do that and how you then apply it to the assignment or apply it to the discussion that you're having. The most important thing is to have good solid evidence and to have credible evidence, not just because I said so or because so-and-so said so. Like, it needs to have some credibility to it. Again, I'm letting you read some of this. I'm not going to read it all to you. I'm just kind of giving you the overview. Rule 5 is when you engage in debate. Debate, again, doesn't have to be a bad word. Debate is just sharing your point of view, sharing your side of the issue. You want to develop your position. You want to be able to prove your position. You want to be able to support it with something that has been read or researched to properly engage with debate, because you want to include that evidence so that the person you're debating can then receive it. Hopefully they're open-minded as well and they're receiving it properly. Some students say they find it hard to kind of work with conflicting theories or arguments, and they're not sure how to place it, and they're not sure what to do with it. But it's important to remember that academic debates aren't always clear cut. Sometimes there is some gray area, and that's okay. You can accept that. It's just sort of what you do with it is important. A lot of us look at things as black and white, right or wrong, or I have to please this, this side over that side. But sometimes you have to kind of bring everything to the middle and then sort of sort it out. And even after doing all that, there still may be some things that are unsolved or gray area. And that's part of that analysis piece, that you're thinking through it. You're sort of, think of it like a wade pool, or, a pool of water. You're sort of wading through it, trying to figure it all out and find your way with it. And that's okay. And it may be frustrating sometimes because you have so much information coming at you. You just don't know how to organize it. But, you have to just develop that skill, and you have to develop systems for how to organize the information and have grace with yourself that some things may not fit properly. Rule 6, when you structure an argument, if you're engaged in critical debate with issues, you have to have a final position. You have to have a place where you've landed with it. You want to have good reasons and strong support as you display your conclusion for whatever you're showing that you've analyzed. And you want to consider how that evidence, sort of proves your point. Again, a lot of analysis involves kind of forming a point of view and then sharing that, but then also listening to someone that may have differing opinions, and then maybe sometimes reshaping your own thoughts about it because you're accepting some other things. It's sort of a fluid process. Analysis sometimes has to, when you evaluate something, or when you analyze something, sometimes you're having to reshape it a little bit, and that's okay. That's part of being an intelligent thinker and being an academic thinker, and being able to take a lot of information and do different things with it, but, supporting your conclusions. Many student assignments include critical analysis or complex ideas, because a lot of things you do in college, we as instructors, we're trying to see what can you do with a lot of information. How can you disseminate it? How can you organize it? And then how do you shape it into something that makes sense? I could have a class of 25 people and I could give them the same topic, and maybe even we could work off of a similar thesis, but probably those 25 people would be doing 25 different things if they're good critical thinkers with that set of information, because they're approaching it from different sides. They're utilizing different evidence to prove different conclusions, and that's okay. That's part of the journey with being a college student, as you're learning how to analyze things, and you're learning how to use that information, and you're learning how to incorporate that evidence and information into a conclusion that you've made. So just remember that there are no easy answers. Some of you may have decided you want to be a nurse, and one of the things I hear, the big things that I hear complaint-wise for nursing students, is they have to take these tests that may have 2 right answers. It's a multiple choice question and it has two answers to it, but one is more right than the other. Doesn't mean that both answers aren't right, but there's only one answer that will be counted as right, and that's because it's slightly more right than the other one, and it takes a lot of critical analysis skills to come up with the right answer. I would say if you talk to someone in engineering, they're constantly doing projects, hands-on projects, and building things and solving problems and coming up with solutions to things. And it's probably not the first solution they came up with. They're having to reshape it, and they're having to kind of trial and error and then think about what worked and what didn't work. And sometimes they work on teams. We have a robotics team at JCC, and I'm sure they're not taking the first robot that they started with to the competition. They have reshaped, reconsidered, brought things back to the table to form new ideas and new solutions. And that's just part of the journey. So don't get upset if you're having to reshape some ideas along the way. That's part of the journey. And that's what getting a college education is sort of all about, that we're wanting to make you critical thinkers when you do those jobs later: engineering, nursing, teaching, law enforcement, radiography, all the things. Those take critical thinking skills, and you want to be, at the top of your game with that. So that's why we're sort of making you do all this critical thinking and not giving you the easy answers, because we want you to form those yourself. Okay, so that's the end of the two handouts. Again, go back and read those, because I've given you an overview. I've sort of given you ideas about these concepts, and you will have a test that is based on these three handouts. So I would say go back and take notes on them. Maybe consider what I've said about them. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks a lot.